With COVID-19 still raging around the world, we have to update our border opening predictions that we released last month. Here's our take on when will the New Zealand border open to international travelers.
Alright, hi guys, this is Robin and I'm Laura and we are the team behind NZPocketGuide.com, which is New Zealand's largest travel guide, and we have been doing these updated videos for you guys to just sort of give our predictions on when the borders will open for New Zealand. And this video is being recorded in August 2020, just so you know for the time, and obviously as the months go on and as things change we will be updating these videos. But just to start this one off, we're just going to start with what is the current state of COVID-19 in New Zealand.
So just so you guys know, we are going to be starting with a lot of official information. So they are going to be all the facts that we get from the New Zealand government. And as soon as we start talking about speculation and our predictions, we will let you know, so you know when the kind of official news stops and when our predictions start, just so you are not fooled by fake news or anything like that. We're just here to give you a bit of context for you guys to know that, to get more information for planning your trip. We're not here to spread any fake news. Anyway, the current state of COVID-19 in New Zealand is actually, well, pretty good. We are part of a handful of countries which have successfully gotten rid of all community transmission in the country. That means that it has been over 70 days at the recording time in New Zealand that we haven't had a single community transmission of COVID-19. So all the cases of COVID-19 that we currently have in New Zealand, which is about 20 at the moment, they are all from people coming from overseas. This means that because those people are already in managed isolation, so they are basically quarantined and taken care of by the New Zealand government, us people of New Zealand are kind of enjoying a little bit more freedom than many other people in the world. But that also means that we are being very, very careful in when to reopen our borders and when to kind of take a risk of getting more people into the country. So, speaking of that, let's go over our current border policies.
Alright, so I've got official information here from Immigration New Zealand. So this is currently the situation with the border closures. So currently the New Zealand border is closed to almost all travellers wanting to travel to New Zealand, either by air or by sea. There are some exceptions to the closure though. There are two reasons why you might be allowed to travel to New Zealand or enter New Zealand while the border is closed. Either you qualify as someone whom the border closure does not apply, or we consider that you have a critical purpose for travel while the border is closed and grant you a visa which recognises this. To gain approval to travel under one of the reasons, most people must submit a request to Immigration New Zealand and be invited to apply for a visa or variation of conditions which, if approved, will allow them entry. A small group of people do not need to seek approval before they travel, such as New Zealand citizens. So once people do enter New Zealand, they are required to stay in quarantine or isolation facilities for 14 days upon arrival. Which, do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
So a managed isolation or quarantine is it's not something that looks as scary as it is in the movie. It's basically a government managed hotel where people have to stay for 14 days in order to be monitored and, well, quarantined for that period of time, just to make sure that they do not have the virus. So the way it works is that as soon as you arrive at the airport, you will be taken into this managed isolation, and on day three, and on day 3 of your isolation, you will be giving a swab test, and hopefully that's going to remain negative. And on day 12 of your 14-day isolation, you're going to be giving another swab test, and hopefully that's going to be negative as well. If both of your swab tests were negative and you are doing the whole 14 days without any problem, then you will be able to get into New Zealand and go on with your little business. It's probably mostly for people that are coming back home at this stage, so you just basically get home and get back to your family. Now, so far, the New Zealand government has been footing the bill for this managed isolation. That means that travelers do not have to pay anything for the hotel fees and for basically for anything else for this managed isolation. But there is a lot of chatters reported in the news at the moment about starting charging certain amount of travelers for that. So again, this is not official news, and I always tell you when it's not official news, but there has been a lot of information about that. The reason why I'm talking about it is because this may apply to you. If you're just coming to New Zealand for a holiday, you're probably going to be one of those people that will have to be charged for this isolation. And that doesn't mean you can pick whichever hotel you want. It still has to be one of those government hotels, but you may be charged for that. Again, the condition are still up in the air. There is something about traveling 90 days for more than 90 days in New Zealand and all those kind of things. So there is a lot of conditions. We're not going to go through that, but the information that you may want to know is that the fee which is currently discussed is about 3,100 New Zealand dollars for this 14 days managed isolation. So if you're planning to come to New Zealand and the quarantine will apply to you, at that point you may be looking at an extra fee of 3,100 New Zealand dollars. Again, it's not official yet, it's not applying yet, but that may be something worth considering when planning your budget. Now, we are here to do a video about when will the border open for every country. So we're going to go through every country, but first we're going to be talking about why New Zealand will pick one country over another to decide when to open the border and who's going to be opening first and last and everything. So let's just give you a little bit of context before we go through the list of every countries.
Yeah, so again, this is just the part of the video where we do our opinion, our speculations, and what we see for New Zealand opening its borders and how they choose the countries and which countries to open the borders to is really dependent on how your country is doing with the coronavirus. If the coronavirus is well sort of quarantined or managed in your country, then New Zealand would be probably more likely to open the borders to your country. On the other hand, if your country is not doing so well with the coronavirus and there's lots of outbreaks and that sort of thing, then New Zealand is less likely to open to that country. And also there's the other case of countries that have sort of open borders and have a lot of travel going through, which does have a risk of coronavirus coming into their country, for instance. That is also going to be something that New Zealand might be looking at to probably be less likely to open the borders to that sort of country which has sort of an open border already. So yeah, so that's pretty much it on that sort of thing. Yeah.
All right, so let's get started with our prediction. Again, just prediction, just speculation, and hopefully we are wrong. Hopefully the New Zealand border opens way earlier than that. We hope to be wrong in all those predictions, but we also want you to have reasonable expectations when planning your trip. So let's get started with Australia. Last time we made the video, we actually were saying that Australia will be the first country that's going to be reopening its border with New Zealand. There was big talk about the Trans-Tasman bubble. The Tasman Sea is the sea that separates New Zealand and Australia. And sadly, in recent weeks, Australia has seen a lot of extra cases of COVID-19. It has been reported in the news that the state of Victoria is not doing so well on that front, and also there is a lot of travel between states. There is a lot of interstate travel within Australia, which means that the outbreaks are not likely to be very well contained in only one small area and could go over all the country. So for all those reasons, there have been some announcements by the New Zealand government that the border openings with Australia will be delayed. And because of those delays, Australia may not be the first country that New Zealand open its borders to, and we're going to be pushing our prediction for opening of the borders with Australia to about December 2020. That's our take on it. Hopefully we're wrong, but that's our take on this one. That brings me to what will be the first countries that New Zealand will open its borders to, and those are two countries in the Pacific Islands, namely the Cook Islands and Niue. So the Cook Islands and Niue are both part of the New Zealand realm. That means that New Zealand enjoys really special relationship with the Cook Islands and Niue. Those two islands are they have a lot of economic ties with New Zealand. There's a lot of international representation with New Zealand, and so that makes it really easy to kind of create agreement with them. But most importantly, both of those countries are completely COVID-19 free right now. So that means that they have sealed themselves from the world, and they also haven't had any of the virus. And for this reason, New Zealand is kind of more inclined to open its border to those two countries in order to allow free travel for Cook Island citizen, New Zealand citizen, and New Zealand citizen within all those countries. So for those reasons, there have been a lot of chatters about reopening the borders, and actually the New Zealand government have stated on the 19th of June that an agreement between the Cook Islands and Niue and New Zealand were only weeks away. So this video is recorded in August, so we're already many weeks past that announcement, but we're thinking that this still may be happening by October 2020. So we think that the first country that's going to be opening will be Niue and the Cook Islands. Now, if you are a Kiwi right now watching this video and you're planning a trip to either the Cook Island or Niue, we actually have a travel guide of Niue for you guys. It's called niuepocketguide.com, and it's the largest travel guide ever written for Niue. So you may want to check this one out if you want to plan an escape from New Zealand. It's an awesome place to visit. Anyway, let's talk about some other South Pacific islands, which may be the next kind of things to reopen.
Yeah, so there are, of course, many other South Pacific islands, and we're predicting that they're not going to open, or New Zealand won't be opening the borders to those islands quite as soon as Niue and the Cook Islands. For instance, there's French Polynesia that they have... French Polynesia's opened up their borders entirely, but that might be a little bit risky for New Zealand to open their borders there. We're thinking, so for that reason, we would say that the opening the borders for New Zealand would be perhaps pushed back to January 2021 for other South Pacific islands.
So that would be French Polynesia, Tonga, Samoa, all those kind of islands. We think it's going to be about January. Alright, so moving on to Asia, the country of Singapore and Taiwan have been managing the virus quite well, and they have shown that they kind of got community transmission of the disease basically kind of under control. And also they do enjoy special relationship with New Zealand as well. New Zealand has a lot of agreements with those two areas of the world, and that means that we think that the border for those two countries may be opening around January to February, so late January to February 2021. Other countries in Asia?
So for other countries like Korea, Japan, China and Hong Kong, of course these sort of countries, they had sort of outbreaks early on within this pandemic that happened, but it seems to be sort of, they've had their peak, they're sort of going down, or at least having the facilities to manage the virus now. So for this reason, we think that the borders will open to these sort of countries around February 2021.
Alright, moving on to India. So India does enjoy a good relationship with New Zealand as well, sending a lot of students in New Zealand. And just a quick update on this, we will be making a separate video about student visas and student kind of expectations for New Zealand, because they're not really tourists and they enjoy kind of a really different kind of way to travel to New Zealand. So if you are planning to come and study in New Zealand and you want to know more information and see when will you be able to do that, check out our video. It's coming in a couple of days. We just making sure that we get all the information and we'll get that released to you guys as soon as we can. Anyway, India. For India, we're thinking about late February 2021 for borders opening. Moving on to the UK. So the UK and New Zealand are kind of sister countries. There is great relations, part of the Commonwealth, I think is the word. And despite the fact the UK does not have or does not appear to have the coronavirus under control from the news that we get here in New Zealand, we still think that it's going to be one of the earliest countries to reopen its border with New Zealand in Europe, and therefore we are putting that in late February 2021. So we think it's going to be in Europe, the first country that reopened. For the rest of Europe, we're pushing it 1 month and making it to March 2021 for border reopenings with New Zealand. That's just from kind of the news that we're getting at the moment. There is not being too much talking about reopening all the borders with like Italy and Germany and everything, but we still think like once the UK is going to be reopening, it's going to be a kind of a close second coming afterwards. For USA, we are getting a lot of news from kind of not well managed virus. And for this reason, we are not seeing the border reopening with the USA until April 2021. So that's the end of summer in New Zealand. So we're thinking that there's going to be a full summer holiday in New Zealand that's going to be missed for US citizens. So that's just from the news that we're getting at the moment from New Zealand. And from South America, we're getting a lot of news, especially from Brazil, where the virus looks to be unmanaged. Again, it's news that we're getting here from New Zealand, right? So obviously everything is to be taken with a grain of salt, but we're seeing an opening of the borders for May 2021. Again, all those dates are subject to change for multiple reasons. First up, because they just are prediction. Predictions are speculation. It's it's absolutely no fact or anything like that. Second, there may be vaccines coming up, and at this point, then the whole world will be vaccinated, and everything is going to go well and good. Another reason why the border may reopen faster is that in New Zealand we're having an election coming in September, and if we get a change of leadership, we may get a complete shift in policy with a government that may just say, okay, it's worth taking the risk to restart the economy, because the tourism is a massive part of the New Zealand economy. So there may be some factor that make it change, but so far those are predictions.
Yeah, so just to make it super clear that all the border opening dates that we've just mentioned, and also the reasons why the border openings will be around those times is basically just our speculations. It's our opinions, just based off like the research that we've done and stuff like that. And we kind of want to make these videos as well so that you guys can sort of get some like sort of better expectations, or more sort of reasonable expectations of why the borders will be opening.
Yeah, we don't want you to believe that you would be able to travel to New Zealand next month.
We basically don't want you guys to be planning your trip for next month or booking anything too soon when it looks like it's really not going to be the case that the borders will open. So just so you guys are sort of as much in the loop as we can make you guys be. But what we will be doing with these videos is we will be releasing new videos with new predictions, probably once a month, so that you guys can get some updates on that. So the best way to make sure that you don't miss those updates is to subscribe to our channel, and also check out nzpocketguide.com for updates, and also to help plan your trip to New Zealand, even if you can't book anything just yet, just so that you can plan the dream trip when the borders do open.
Yeah, you got plenty of time right now. You're sitting at home, you're safe, you got nothing else to do. Plan your trip to New Zealand. We've got so much information on the website, and it's all free to use, so here you go. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. We will keep you up to date as much as we can on the situation, and if you have any questions about traveling in New Zealand, make sure to put them in the comment of these videos, or to join us in one of our live sessions. We're live every single week at 8 a.m. New Zealand time on Sunday. And you can come chat with us and ask us all your travel questions. We're here for that.
Yep.
Thank you very much. Bye bye.